Hello everyone, welcome to this video. So as the PMP exam is all set to transition from its current PMBOK 7th edition to the PMBOK 8th edition in July this year, I know many of you will be trying to clear the exam within the next 3 to 4 months. And on the other hand, some of you might be thinking of waiting until July 2026 to take the exam in its new format, which is perfectly fine as well. Now, to help both of you manage this transition smoothly, I will be doing some bonus PMP exam questions and answers practice sessions like these over the next few months. And the intent of these sessions would be to practice the types of questions common within the exam syllabus, both for the current format of the exam and the new format of the exam. Because, believe it or not, even with this new transition, about 70 to 80% of the PMP exam syllabus will still stay the same. So regardless of whether you plan to write the PMBOK 7th edition or let's say the PMBOK 8th edition of the exam, these practice sessions, in addition to my regular monthly Q&A sessions, are going to help you prepare for the PMP exam with the right mindset. So 5 questions common across both the PMBOK 7 and the PMBOK 8 syllabus. Let's get started.
Question number 1, guys. Pause the video, read the question properly and try to answer it before we start solving this together. Okay, so let's start solving question number 1 together. The interior designing team wants to build a model show home to advertise a holiday retreat project to potential buyers. Okay, they have approached a project management consultancy firm to develop the project approach. What should the consultancy firm do to begin the development process? Now, a very important thing to note here, guys, is about the product which is being discussed in this question. Okay, so the product is not the entire holiday retreat, but a model show home. Okay, so you can think of this as a prototype maybe. Okay, so let's look at the options one by one. Work with the interior designing team to break down the requirements into story points. Okay, now that looks like a reasonable option to me. You can say that it is important to break down the requirements into story points, which will help you to plan the sprint or the iterations. Okay, so let's hold this option for now. Option B, meet with the subject matter experts to identify all risks and develop risk management plan. Now this is an incorrect option, guys, and we can eliminate it straight away. And this is primarily because of the fact that it is a very generic statement, and identifying all of the risks at the beginning of a prototype product is not a very sensible approach, and it is not a very reasonable approach as well. Okay, so primarily because of this superlative of all, we can eliminate this option because it is not feasible to identify all of the risks at the beginning of a project. Okay, option C, review the business case to understand the benefits management plan. Now, it might make sense that to understand the benefits management plan, you need to review the business case. But the problem with this option is, guys, it is no way linking to the scenario or the context of the question. Okay, so beware of such type of options, which are true if they are evaluated standalone, but when compared to the scenario or the context of the question, it doesn't have any linkage to it. Okay, and for this reason, we can eliminate option C. Option D, collect requirements for the minimum viable product to represent the model show home. Now this is also a very good option, guys, because it is proposing that you should think about how to develop the minimum viable product first, because the show home is a model show home, right? It is not the entire holiday retreat project. Okay, so now after the first iteration, we are left with option A and option D. Now, as I was mentioning previously, guys, if you assess option A very critically, option A is talking about breaking down the requirements of the project in its entirety into story points just at the point of developing the prototype. Okay, you do not need, or you may not have such amount of detail at the beginning of a project when you are only developing the prototype. Okay, because the feedback from the prototype might influence how the project requirements will pan out at the later stages. Okay, so for this reason, guys, option A is also incorrect, and the correct answer to this question is option D, which is to collect requirements from the minimum viable product, which is the model show home in this scenario, to develop the project approach as has been asked in the question scenario. Okay, so question number 2, guys. The drill remains the same. Please read the question and try to answer it before we solve it together. Okay, right. So let's start solving the question. In a hostel block refurbishment project, which you are leading as a project manager, you have completed the following steps. Finish the construction works, confirm with the client that the hostel block is ready to reoccupy, confirm that the functionality of the mechanical and the electrical installations are verified by quality assurance, and you have informed the client as well. What is the next step you should ideally be taking as a project manager in this scenario? Okay, and it has given you four options: A, B, C, and D. Right. Now, if you look at the question stem, guys, it ideally hints that this project is in the closeout phase, right? Because since you have finished the construction works, you have confirmed the client that the hostel block is ready to reoccupy, you have done all the quality assurance checks, etc., etc. So this is definitely a scenario which is in the closeout stage of the project. Okay. So with that in mind, let's start evaluating the options one by one. Option A, review, verify, and complete the acceptance document with quality assurance. Okay. Now, this looks like a bit of a redundant activity to me, and that's primarily because all the mechanical and electrical installations as is being provided in this scenario are being verified by quality assurance. Okay. Now, in the closeout stage, now completion of the acceptance documents should have been occurring as part of this step already. Okay. So it is unlikely that the quality assurance process is complete without these acceptance documents being signed by yourself or being signed by the client. Okay, because if you note here in this question stem, it has been mentioned that it is confirmed that the functionality of the mechanical and the electrical installations are verified already. Okay, so this looks like a redundant option, and that is why I will eliminate it straight away. Option B, ensure that all the supplier invoices are paid for. Okay, now you might argue that before the project ends, you need to clear all the supplier invoices so the books of accounts closes out by the end of the project. Okay, so let's park this option for now. Option C, update the risk register and issue log. Okay, that's a very generic option, guys, because updating of the risk register and issue log starts to happen from the execution stage of the project and continues throughout the monitoring and controlling stage and into the closeout stage as well. Okay, so this is not something specific that needs to happen in the closeout stage, and for that reason this option is quite broad and doesn't gel too well with the scenario that has been provided as part of the project closeout scenario, and that is why I will eliminate option C. Option D, add the lessons learned to the organizational process assets, which are the OPAs. Okay, now this is also a valid option, guys, because before you close out a project, if you go and study the closing phase of PMBOK, you will see that one of the critical activities that is performed during a closeout process is to update the lessons learned register from the project and file it as part of your organizational process assets. Okay, now let's park this option as well, option D. Okay, now after the first iteration we are left with option B and option D. Okay, now if we go back to option B and try to analyze it critically again, ensuring that all supplier invoices are paid for as part of the closeout stage of the project doesn't seem quite likely. Okay, and I'll tell you why. I would like you to open the 49 process chart of the PMBOK and check that whether there are any procurement activities mentioned as part of the closeout stage of any project. Okay, no, right? So there are no activities from procurement management that are performed as part of the closeout stage of the project as per PMBOK guidelines. Okay, so that is one of the primary reason why this option does not gel quite well with the scenario that has been provided as part of the question stem. Okay, and the second thing which you need to know practically as well, guys, that when you are doing a project, ensuring that all the supplier invoices are paid as part of the project might be something which you need to take help from accounts or finance to get that sorted, but that is not a very core project activity, because sometimes it happens that some of the invoices may have some documentation issues, some of the invoices might have some fixed terms and conditions through which the payment will happen, etc., etc., and that is generally managed by finance, which is a part of your organizational corporate finance. Okay, so that is not a core project activity. So this is the reason why option B is not a core closeout activity, and hence in the 49 process chart, you will not see any activity from procurement management happening in the closeout stage of the project, because most of these checks and reconciliations happen during the monitoring and controlling phase as part of your control procurement activities. Okay, so that is the reason why option B is also incorrect, and the correct answer to this question is option D, which is to add the lessons learned of the project to your organizational process assets.
So if you are finding the session helpful, please press the like button and subscribe to this channel, PMP with Ray. It's surprising that more than 70% of you who watch these videos on this channel are not yet subscribed, okay? So your support to help this channel grow will be highly appreciated. And now let's move on to the next one.
Question number 3, guys. The drill remains the same. Read the question and try to answer it yourself before we solve it together. Right, so let's start. You are the project manager for a housing development project, and it has been brought to your notice that one of your site supervisors is having some issues with the terms and conditions in the contract of the bricklaying contractor. Okay, so one of the activities is bricklaying. So you have a contract supporting that, and one of your site supervisors is having problems or issues with your supplier. Okay, either of the two parties have not arrived at a resolution yet. What should be your first mode? Okay, very important. What should be your first mode of communication to resolve this conflict? Email, face-to-face conversation, telephonic conversation, or text message? Okay, now the funny thing is, guys, to answer such questions you need to know what is the PMP mandated hierarchy of communication channels. Okay, now if I just take a step forward and take you to the section of the PMBOK 7th edition which talks about this, you will be able to answer this question in less than 30 seconds. Okay, so read this snippet here, guys, where PMBOK 7th edition, I have mentioned the section here as well, talks about the importance of face-to-face communications over the communication channels such as notes, text messages, or let's say emails and telephonic conversations. Okay, so it is saying that richness in communication allows a broad spectrum of information to be conveyed rapidly. Okay, so that's okay. Situations that entail complex, complicated, and personal information benefit from richer communication channels such as face-to-face communication. Now, going back to the scenario, guys, this is a problem which is happening basis the contract which has been signed between your supplier and yourself, or with your team, right? Which is the bricklaying supplier here. So whenever there is such a problem basis a contract which has been signed between two parties, it falls in this complex category, right? It is not just a simple problem, let's say, of your contractor not performing up to the mark, or there is a bit of quality outage in one of the materials, etc., etc. There is some dispute with some of the clauses of the contract. So that is basically a complex issue which you need to solve. Okay, and going by the PMBOK mandated levels of hierarchy when it comes to communications, get this learning very clear, guys, that PMBOK always prefers face-to-face communication first over communications via emails or text messages or telephonic conversations. So the correct answer to this question is option B, which is face-to-face communication. Now you might argue that, okay, in my projects or in my company I do something very different. My company always prefers email communications before face-to-face communications. Probably my project management organization always promotes telephonic conversation. Those discussions are immaterial, guys. Okay, if you are writing the PMP exam and you are planning to pass the PMP exam with as much as correct answers as possible in the actual exam, you have to align by the PMBOK methods or the PMBOK philosophy. It is immaterial how in real world or how in your company you lead projects in a day-to-day routine. Okay, so this is a very important learning that you need to take out of this question, right? So the correct answer to this question is option B, which is face-to-face communication, and this is the first step, first mode, and the first most preferred communication type as per the project management body of knowledge 7th edition. Right, so question number 4, guys. Pause the video, read the question. It might be a tricky question for you, and try to select an answer before we move forward. Right, so we'll start solving the question. So step number 1, read the question and try to understand that whether it's a type 1 question or a type 2 question, right? So in an agile project, the design and development team integrated an artificial intelligence module in the project to improve its performance. Okay, seems like a good approach to me. To validate the same, the team demonstrated the increased efficiency of the product via the next set of time-boxed iterations. Even better, so it is not only that the team has actually integrated that module, it has demonstrated also that this module will provide increased efficiency to the final product. Okay. However, now from here, things start to get interesting. In a recent sprint retrospective meeting, the product owner expressed discontent regarding the change since this was done without any approvals. Now, alarm bells should start ringing in your mind, right? Okay, a change done without proper approvals. It was instructed that the team roll back the improvements and redo the work based on the original product design, okay, which most probably didn't take into consideration this artificial intelligence module. How the project manager could have prevented this situation. Okay, now if we study the stem of the question, it hints at a behavior which the project manager needed to exhibit, and with that in mind, we might say that this is a type 1 question. Okay, now in a type 1 question, what we do, we use the ideal project manager behavior framework coupled with the positive bias principle. Now with that in mind, let's start evaluating the options one by one. Redefine the team ground rules and decision authority levels. Okay, it might be a good option. You might say that the project manager should define the team ground rules once again and define the decision authority levels for change management, let's say. But does it really mention change management, that decision authority levels of change management? It might be decision authority levels of cost. It might be decision authority levels of cost management. It might be decision authority levels of schedule management. Okay, again, it's a bit broad option, but let's keep it on the table for now. Option B, put forward a recommendation to proceed with the change since this has demonstrated increased efficiency. Now, this is incorrect, okay, and that is primarily because it might have demonstrated an increased efficiency and you might as well put a recommendation to include it. Let's look at the stem of the question. What is the stem of the question asking from you? It is asking that how the project manager could have prevented the situation. It is not asking you that how the project manager now can move on with whatever has happened. Okay, so this is a very fine aspect of option B which you need to note, right? And that is why many of you might have selected option B thinking that it is okay to have a, let's say, gold plating of a project which will demonstrate increased efficiency. But that is not what the question is asking. The question is asking that how the project manager could have prevented this gold plating or prevented this extra bit of feature from being added to the final product. And that is why option number B is incorrect, because it is hinting towards progressing the project with this extra bit of feature already included in the product design. Okay, that's not what we are looking for. Option C, demonstrate servant leadership and plan to remove all impediments from the team. Now this is very generic option, guys. I hope none of you have selected it. And also look at this superlative all. Okay, so removing all impediments of the project just out of the single scenario looks quite a long shot to me, right? So that is why option C is also incorrect. Finally, option D, enable regular review meetings with the product owner and capture deviations early in the sprint. Okay, so now we are talking. So what option D is mentioning is, as a project manager, you enable regular review meetings, and these are often called sprint review meetings, right? Again, please refer back to my video on agile ceremonies and you will be knowing what is the structure of a sprint review meeting. Okay, so in a sprint review meeting, you talk about the possible deviations which can be incorporated in a project and whether you need to go for a formal approval for doing that, whether an informal approval is okay, but at least you need some sort of a heads up from the product owner or the customer before making any changes in the product, right? Because that is the essence of change management. Okay, so let's park option D as well. Now, if we come back to option A, guys, redefining team ground rules and decision authority levels is a very broad option, because team ground rules can mean hundreds of things, right? It can talk about the meeting procedure. It can talk about how a team should be planning leaves between themselves. Okay. It can talk about how a team should be communicating within themselves, etc., etc. And same goes for decision authority levels. So in your PMP exam, you will often get such broad options which will talk about definitely some good practices in project management, but those may not be relevant to the scenario. Very important. So option A may be correct in overall project management or overall in an agile or a hybrid project, but it is not quite relevant for the scenario that is presented in this question. So for that reason, option number A is incorrect, and the correct answer to this question is option number D, which is to enable regular review meetings with the product owner and capturing deviations early in the sprint. Also, before we move on to the next question, guys, I would like you to notice how we have rejected every option based on solid grounds before arriving at the correct answer. So question number 5, guys, pause the video, read the question and try to answer it before we move forward. Right, so let's start solving the question together. There were gaps identified in understanding the approved definition of done for a product functionality which was to be developed across a few iterations. Okay, this has been highlighted in a sprint review meeting by one of the subject matter expert resources. Now you need to understand what is definition of done in the context of agile projects. Let's move on. As a result, the product has not met its acceptance criteria. How should the project manager tackle the situation? Now, if we look at the stem of the question, it's typically a type 1 question. So we'll be using the positive bias principle coupled with the ideal project manager behavior framework. Okay, so let's evaluate the options one by one. Trigger a change management process since the functionality was approved initially. Now, this is incorrect, guys. Okay, definitely the functionality was approved as it is mentioned here, but in the end you need to understand that it's a gap of your team, that your team was not able to understand or not able to comprehend the correct definition of done for the product functionality. So the onus lies on you and your team to correct the situation. So you just can't go and raise a change request for something which you have not understood correctly. Okay, so option A is incorrect. Next, plan a brainstorming session to tackle this impediment during the design phase. Now that's also a sensible option. I can hold this for now because essentially it's talking about problem solving. You have an impediment and you are trying to tackle it in the design phase, which is fairly early in a project. Okay, let's look at option C. Add this to the agenda for sprint retrospective after the iteration is completed. Again, it's a nonsensical option to me. Why would you wait till the end of the iteration and discuss something as a retrospective where you have to solve it now, today with your team, right? So that is just pushing problems under the carpet, and that is not a sensible approach as a project manager or as a scrum master in a agile project. So we can safely eliminate option C. Option D, plan a brainstorming session to tackle this impediment during the testing phase. Okay, now if you look very closely at option B and option D, the only point of difference is the design phase and the testing phase here. So one option is recommending you to tackle this problem in the design phase, which is fairly early in the project, and another option is recommending you to tackle the problem in the testing phase, which is fairly late in the project, right? Now you tell me, guys, as a sensible project manager, what is a good approach? To tackle a problem early or to tackle a problem late? Okay, now the answer is very simple, right? You have to have the capacity to tackle these kind of problems early in your project so that you can be more proactive and you don't end up spending more money and resources during the testing phase of the project, where there could be a lot of rework that would be generated if you try to address something which has been built wrong. Okay, so if the design is incorrect, trying to correct it in the testing phase might be a big challenge. Okay, so that way it is always a sensible approach to address such kind of issues in the design phase of the project rather than having a reactive approach to tackle impediments in the testing phase of the project, which is fairly late in the project or in a sprint in agile project, right? So you see, guys, you do not need a PhD level understanding of agile to answer such questions. Okay, a basic understanding of the terms and terminologies coupled with right common sense is enough to answer such kind of questions correctly. Okay, so the correct answer to this question is option B, and D is a incorrect answer choice.
I hope you liked the video. Please press the like button and I'll see you again in the next one.